Gentlemen, Brother Mike's going to speak to us in just a minute, but I want to relay something that I think you all need to know. Benny Updike used to sit right over here sometimes. He'd be here from month to month. Benny died last month at 96 years of age. And one of the things I wanted to tell you about that is this. Benny received Christ in his 95th year. And he said coming here to this breakfast was the closest thing he got to church in his life. And he bowed his head, received Christ, confessed his sins. I was there. And he turned to his daughter and he said, it went like this. He said, I want you to know everything is all right between me and the Lord.
Wow.
And his daughter told me, some months had gone by, and his daughter told me that when they were taking him out to the hospital, he knew good and well it was the last time he'd be home. He'd laid out his clothing in the closet and he was ready to go. And his last motion going out of the house was this to his daughter. Everything's going to be all right. I wanted to thank you men, for each and every one of you who have ever said something to Ben, who have ever participated in him being here and just being kind and gracious to him. For a man to come to Christ in his 90s is incredible. And I thank the Lord. He was able to come here and participate in this time together and come to know Christ as his Savior. Tremendous, tremendous thing. And I want to thank each one of you who said hello to him, greeted him, just whatever. And I want to thank you, men. It's a landmark in my life as a pastor to be able to minister to Benny, but for what you did, thanks.
Yes, one thing, I want to bring y'all up to date. Last year, I got a thing from Equipping Leaders International. That's who we send the money to help support Mike. We were just under $3,200 for the year. This group right here done. To help show what we're doing, he'll show you here in a little bit. But your money is helped go towards this. And we thank you all very much.
Mike, tell us what the Lord's been doing.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate the support that you guys have given. It's making a difference, and it's more important now than ever. I want to go through some things. I was a month in Uganda and didn't allow it. And Uganda, especially northern Uganda, is experiencing very horrible agricultural situations. I want to talk a little bit about it today. This is the map of the Global Hunger Index. If it's gray, it's not a problem, or they don't really know what's going on. If it's green, that's pretty good. Things are good, people are eating, it's not a problem. If it's this tan color, it's starting to they're having problems. If it's this orange color, it's serious problems. People are going, they call it alarming food insecurity. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. These countries are the countries that I'm currently working with in Africa. When I first started coming here, there were 2 of them. And now we have, I think it's 20 something, 15, 18, somewhere in that neighborhood. All of these areas, there's serious problems with their agriculture. I'm not one of the type of people who are going to walk around saying that we are causing all this climate change and we have to, stop using our grills or whatever they want you to do. I'm not one of those people, but in the last 5 years, there has been severe drought in many parts of the world. The climate changes all the time. Doesn't mean that people are doing it. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. But the bottom line is, many of these areas that I'm working, they have had numbers of years in a row where they've had crop failure, or they've had very difficult times growing their food. So at the beginning of January, after December, enjoying the oysters here, I'm going to remind myself it's once a year. I went to Uganda, and I taught at African Bible University in Kampala, Uganda. This is my class. They are raising their hands. This is the last day of class. When I asked them how many of them would implement and teach the methods that they learned in the class, and they all raised their hands. So that was good news. The picture of us making compost. Hopefully you know what compost is. It's like God's perfect fertilizer. And you can make it with you put different materials, browns, greens, and manure, and you layer it in, and it gets hot, and it turns into compost. You turn it, it's a method that we teach because many people can't afford chemical fertilizers, and this is a better way of doing it anyway. So, some pictures of us doing the compost. This young man is a refugee from South Sudan who was in a refugee camp in the northern part of the country. Those lines across his head are something they do when they're young to identify them with their tribe. But he was one of the students, and he will be going back to the refugee camp and teach them the methods so that the people who are there can help support their own food needs. And when they eventually leave the refugee camp, they will have some skills that will help them when they go. So this was the class showing their certificates. It was a very good class, and many of them have already begun training other people in the areas that they lived in, and we're just about a month out from that training now. So we've already got people. This is a very good group. They were very passionate, and they were already training their neighbors in the methods that we teach. So in the middle of my trip, I left Uganda and went to Malawi, and I was in Malawi for 8 or 9 days, and then I went back to Uganda. And so when I went to Malawi, one of the things I was doing was overseeing a beekeeping practical training. Beekeeping is a lot easier in the tropics than it is here. Here, everybody, the whole time you're a beekeeper, you're trying to get the bees ready to get through winter, and a lot of times they don't make it. But in the tropics, they don't have winter, so they don't have that problem. And so we were teaching beekeeping. It's a very easy way, especially for people like pastors, to have an alternate income. In the tropics, you do not have much work to do through the year. Once you have built the hive and you put some wax in it, the bees will come on their own and fill the hive. And once or twice a year, you harvest the honey. And that's all you have to do. And it's a good income, because the only other way people have honey there, and they love it, they drink a lot of tea, and they use the honey as a sweetener in their tea. But the only way they can harvest it is to climb way up into a tree with a rope tied around their belt. And they climb way up in the canopy, like 100 feet up, big, tall jungle tree, to get a hive, a swarm of bees that is up high. And they'll climb up there, and they'll have a ski mask on. You see people with toboggans on this time of year with just the eyes and a mouth, and you pull it over your head to keep your head warm. They'll wear that, and they'll put some gloves on, and they go up, and the bees are stinging them still. But they climb up to get this, and they'll break off a hive, a piece of a comb, and they'll put it in the basket that's tied to the rope, and they'll lower it down. And they'll do that until they got it all. And if they're 100 feet up, they get stung, they go like this, and they fall off, they're dead. So because it's so difficult, there's not a large supply of honey.
Right down dangerous.
As you could imagine. So if they build a top bar hive, they can have honey, and it's very easy to harvest. You don't climb, it's right there. So top bar hive is different here. The beehives are like a rectangular box, and you stack them up. There they use this kind of hive, and they hang it from a tree. and they grease the wires because they don't have a lot of the problems we have. They don't have bear getting in the hives. They don't have things like that, but they have ants. And these ants are like, they'll carry you off. But if you hang it and you grease the hangers, the ants can't get to the hive. So that's how we teach it. At the workshop, that was my lunch. I put this in here for Brad. He always likes the food over there. And this was my lunch, a couple of days.
Well, that looks better than bony fish.
Yeah,
It looks like a piece of chicken.
not a lot of meat on the chicken.
Well, but at least it's chicken. I can go for chicken.
Yeah, you recognize the meat.
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
So this is collard greens, and that's chicken.
You think?
And this is called Sima. It's spelled Nsima. And if they do not have this available, they consider themselves to be starving. It's made with corn flour, white corn flour. They pour it in a pot and they cook it and stir it until it becomes solid. It's like stiff mashed potatoes. And you take a piece of that in your hand and you roll it into a ball and you mash it into like a disc, and you reach over and you grab some of the greens and you put it all in your mouth at one time. Of course, your hands are getting pretty greasy by the end of the meal. But they will come, and someone will come by with a basin and a pitcher, like a water pitcher. And they will come by and they will get on their knees in front of you, and they will hold the basin and they will pour the water over your hands. And wash your hands at the beginning of the meal. And at the end of the meal, somebody else will come and they'll do the same thing because you got all this stuff all over you from eating with your fingers.
One thing I will say, Michael, man, you should, because I've made such a big deal out of it, but you have changed my life as far as complaining about food. I don't do that anymore. I'm like, if somebody gives me something I really don't like, all I say is it could be bony fish. I'm thankful for this.
Yeah.
No problem. It's completely changed me as far as.
I love speaking to this group because we have this like enormous spread of breakfast, and then we see that what people are eating elsewhere. But that's a big meal for them. That would be a big meal with the Sima and the chicken. To have protein at all is a big thing for them. It doesn't happen that often.
Well, one of my dreams is for you to actually, and I know it's got to be during the summer, but I'd love to see like Moose's reaction if he went through that line. Because he's never seen anything like that.
Yeah. This lady went to one of our trainings. I have a team of trainers in Malawi who are working in the southern part of the country where they have been having many years in a row of very bad drought, followed by the rainy season, where they have a cyclone, what we call a hurricane, every other week. And it's very difficult agriculture, and they're having problems. They're having a pretty good year this year, but the methods that we teach allow them to have more resilience in their agriculture. We teach about mulching so that the moisture is held in the ground. And this lady was in one of the classes that my trainers had there, and they took me to see her. She only did a small portion with the new methods, because when you're growing your own food, you don't want to take a big risk in something new and it fail, and then you don't have anything to eat. So she had a small portion. She used our methods, and then she had her big field where she used traditional methods, the same as what people would use here. So I'm going to start this video. It will pan by her. You'll see some young men, they're my trainers, and you will see the corn, the maize, they call it maize, all around. That is her traditional method. This is the method that we taught, and you will see her traditional method.
With joy. I told you these two things with joy.
It was planted on the same day. So I asked her, I said, 3 times, the same day. She said yes. By the 3rd time I asked her, she was like looking at me like, why? Can't you believe me? And I said, will you now use this method? She said, from now on, all of this method. It's not easier. In fact, there's more steps to it, but the results are much better. And this is an early variety corn that the cobs aren't as big, but they come on early. And so that helps them get through the harvest if they have an early harvest.
Where does their seed come from?
The
They
seed-
save from a crop, or do they?
They
have that
can, if they're
seed?
using open pollinated variety, which is what we recommend, they can save seed. But there are suppliers for seed in the country. This was my trainers. I had a meeting with them. I held it along the side of the road at a restaurant. It was one of the dumpiest restaurants I've ever been in. But we had sema and chicken and everything. And this was our meeting with my trainers. This young man here, his name is John. He is probably 22. He's one of the lead trainers. And he told my friend, the pastor here in the orange, he told him he had never been in a restaurant before. 22 years old, never had somebody buy him a meal in a restaurant.
Tell them how much it costs.
Huh?
Tell them how much.
Oh
it
yeah, so for all those guys, it cost me $18 for a lunch, like you would expect. I went back then. I left Malawi and went back to Uganda to fly to the northern part of the country. The plane is Mission Aviation Fellowship. If you've been, familiar with missions very long, you know that name. It is a very, very large, very famous mission organization that takes people to very remote areas all over the world. We flew to the northeast corner of the country to a place called Moroto, and this is how they refueled the plane. They roll out 55-gallon drum and turn a crank and pump it into the plane. And when we flew over, I could see the drought. They do a lot of, in that part of the country, it's a lot of herding. They do a lot of cattle, and it's very dry. This picture is from northwest Kenya, right across the border. They are experiencing one of their worst periods of drought in many years. They are now on their 3rd totally failed harvest. This is a field that should be ready to harvest of maize. It should be up and ready to harvest. And they're now turning the cattle in on the fields where their crops are, because the crops are not going to make it, and at least the animals will have something to eat before it completely is dead. This is a picture of a couple of days ago. This is the president of Kenya. He called for a national day of prayer, and he met in a stadium, and he prayed that God would bring rain for them. Just one more slide. This is a note I got from one of the students in Uganda. To be sincere, Professor Michael, you did a great job of making my life turn back to farming. I had lost hope for the many years I was struggling, but all in vain because of the lack of this foundation for farming knowledge. I'm now struggling to find a piece of land for implementation. God bless you, our trainer. So this guy had been a farmer, and he had given up farming because it is so hard there. But now with the methods that we're teaching, it's more resilient to the problems in the weather, and he is now excited about farming again. So we're getting those kind of comments all the time. I had somebody tell us in Swaziland. They wish that they had been doing this for years. They wish they had been doing these methods for years. They would not have struggled as much. And we're having governments, the government of Zimbabwe, and now the government of Rwanda have adopted this practice, and they are doing their trainers that they have, what do you call them? Extension. The extension officers with the Department of Agriculture in Zimbabwe and Rwanda are doing this training, and they're training people in the country. The Department of Education in Swaziland has asked us to take the training to all their schools. So God is really moving. We are getting requests every week. We have requests for us to go more places. So keep us in prayer, but your support is enabling us to have an effect on people, and like the person and the student says, have hope again. Hope that they can take care of themselves. It's one thing when you're farming to make a profit or as a business. It's another thing when the reason you're farming is to keep your family fed, alive. And as I say a lot of times, we're not talking about tomatoes in the backyard so you can have a BLT in the summer. We're talking about food on the table so you don't starve to death. So thank you guys so much for your support. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but with that, I think I made it. I don't have the big hook to hold me out of it.
Could you tell us about Brother Musa in Sierra Leone and the work of the orphanage?
Okay, so Musa, who is a pastor in Sierra Leone, I've been working with since 2019. I am going there on the 28th to do training for him with agriculture. He just sent me pictures. He is now using these methods, and he sent me a picture, and it was corn, and it was nice looking corn. It wasn't like anything. He said, I am the only one in the entire town with corn. Nobody else has survived because they are going through a period of drought. And he's the only one that has any. And people are coming to him and saying, how is this possible? And he said, I will teach you. But in truth, it is because of Jesus. That is how it's possible. And so I will be going there. We have a well that we're having drilled that I put a request out. The water that this village in the cocoa farms, and they're drinking, and if you saw it, it's like unbelievably bad. And we're putting a well there. We're doing a lot of good things. His school has begun to grow. They have 300 children, and they have one outhouse. What could go wrong? So we had a brother who has donated funding to build a latrine, a big building for bathrooms, and hopefully that'll alleviate that problem. But please keep us in prayer. It's been a lot of miles on airplanes and a lot of time away, and I don't see it changing much this year. We're looking at possibly having a separate organization, because as you saw from the first slide here, we started with one country. I started working in Sierra Leone, and now these are the countries that I'm involved in, and it's a lot. So, keep us in prayer. I'm no spring chicken, but God has been very gracious and has kept me moving. So, again, thank you guys so much for your support. Appreciate it. Brother Dan?